Hi everyone, this is 1 year on. I'm Alison. And following on from my previous episode, today's episode continues the interview series with Laurie, my speech pathologist. Firstly, I need to read this disclaimer to you. This episode is general information, it's not medical advice and doesn't replace assessment or care from your own clinical team. If you have concerns about your health or recovery, please seek advice from a qualified health professional. Okay, so after that, I can say that many people do require speech therapy after having stroke, and I was no exception. The next thing I was going to talk about was my own personal situation, because I think, I've been quite open with my listeners. So what did you notice? Because we spoke on the phone first. You called me up and we had a good conversation on the phone. I felt quite elated after that conversation, actually, because it was really exciting for me to have done the assessment and then to have the conversation with you, because you were saying that the appointments that you had coming up would be in like 3 weeks sort of thing time. And then you were sort of gauging, and you spoke to me at that point about the brain training apps and things like that. But in terms of when we first spoke, what were you thinking about in terms of your priorities to focus on with me?
Yeah. So I will say your input was quite an integral part of the plan, because I could look at your assessment, the language assessment we did with you that's looking at higher level language. It also gives us a bit of a glimpse into working memory, verbal reasoning, that type of thing. So I could kind of glean that there were some maybe cognitive linguistic components as well as language, which you confirmed, because I think you were quite helpful in that you did have such intact insight and awareness. So you could come back and say, I've noticed this and this. And I think, okay, well, that actually matches what, we're seeing
What's
as well.
actually shown.
And so that really helps. So I had a suspicion about the cognitive communication component, and so that is where I had that in mind. So when I spoke with you more and started listening to your observations, I realized, yes, there's some aphasia, but kind of wondered if some of the cognitive areas were interfering more. And so that drove when we talked about the brain training programs, which I think you would know more about what's out there nowadays than me. So I haven't kept up with the options. I recommended the one that I knew of that had evidence to support post-stroke, post-brain injury. It will help. And so I recommended that.
You did.
Yeah.
Brain HQ.
Brain HQ, yep. And so...
It drove me mad,
I know. And I'm careful with how I recommend it, because the person needs to have that drive and resilience to stick, because it's hard.
It is hard.
In order to be forcing, I would have explained to you, in order to push that neuroplasticity, it has to be at a very difficult level. Which
if it's too easy, well, you're not getting any gains, are you?
Yeah.
I remember being so tired, after even doing 10 minutes, I'd sleep for an hour.
Yeah.
It was that hard. Yeah. So, but it was great for what it achieved.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
I remember you saying to me, you're like, I hate it, but I love it, but I hate it.
It was this love-hate relationship that you develop with these things. I did move on to one called Lumosity, which was more gamification, that I actually found the attention aspect, I was able to progress quite well with that, and it didn't have the same I hate you component. Oh dear. Can you talk about the practical things that we worked on and what progress looked like? Because I think people would be interested in what because we talked a lot, if you remember, about visualization.
Yes.
Can you remember when we had that conversation? I went, I can't visualize.
I know. So I went back. That's so funny. I reviewed your therapy notes this week in preparation, because I have forgotten quite a bit. So I went back and read them, and I went, oh yeah, the visualizing. Yeah. So, we lean on visualizing as a way to support both comprehension and working memory. And so it's a good strategy that can be helpful in many ways. So that was interesting that you said, you know what, you do not visualize. Are you still holding to that? You don't visualize?
Not in the way you described.
Yeah.
So for instance, I'll have, like if I'm driving, I'll have sort of sweeping moves going through my head, not like a photograph.
Yes, yeah.
Or anything like that. But I don't even remember if I used to visualize before the stroke, so I can't have that.
So
and it's
interesting.
And it's not, I remember you mentioned that that wasn't common.
From my knowledge, it's not. Yeah. I ended up putting it in the bit of the mystery basket.
Yeah.
And thought, well, you know.
I've always
we're
been
not
a medical
gonna sweat
anomaly.
it.
No, there's no point, because what can we do? We can't
Yeah.
change it. But that was a really interesting thing, and I tried really, really hard. And I remember emailing you and going, I was able to do it.
That's funny. And I think that also the mystery basket part of it too was like, well, if you didn't visualize before and that wasn't something how your brain worked, then I'm not gonna be trying to focus on that.
No. So
the visualizing was part of, you know, your therapy approach was a bit different. And as we keep saying, everyone is different, but yours, I would say we took more of kind of this traditional rehabilitation focus on the deficit areas and really focus on those, which isn't always the case with everyone, but it fit what you were wanting to accomplish and your goals. So that's where I feel like we kind of did the more like you were therapied, you know, we really just focused on practicing those weaker areas. So I think we ended up tying in exercises that really incorporated word retrieval with some working memory. Those are the kinds of exercises I recall the most. And you would go home and practice, and we could see some steady improvements as we went. So we just kind of kept going, focusing. And I found in our later notes we were starting to get creative, because at some stage, like, we have to get a bit creative and think outside the box when your progress, you're performing at a much, you know, more advanced level. So I think we were adding time pressure to it. We were making you describe, it was I think kind of a verbal expression and mental manipulation task where you were describing multiple meanings, and we were putting time on it and said, you know, go to create time pressure.
Yeah, and that's
because you identified that was
the deficit
and something that you would need to do, like in a work situation. So I wouldn't torture everyone with that.
Well, for me, it was about, I could see the benefit of the torture, so to speak. I'm not a masochist, really, but that's the thing. It's back to working on the deficits.
Yeah.
And and unfortunately, you are having to.
Right.
And that's the sad part. That's the sad thing about it.
That's the hard thing. And when the goals are, I am motivated to make these areas better because I want to reach this goal, then that's what we're going to do. And so, you know, with someone else who might have different goals, it may be more strategy based, where we're saying, right, we know that visualizing is your strength. Let's use that as a strategy to compensate for some other areas of difficulty. So, yeah, each person, you know, I think it's our job as a clinician to be gauging, you know, again, like your values, your motivation, your resilience, and working with that. And so if I had someone who was struggling with some depression or trauma, you know, things like that, I may choose a different course or guide them in a different direction, because it's just going to be different.
I mean, I definitely had the motivation and the resilience, and certainly doing this podcast and things like that, and you know, keep testing myself and stretching what I can do. So it's been really interesting. I remember memory for me was a big problem. Like, you know, things like when you phone somebody up and you go into those awful queues where you've got to press the numbers. I think anybody finds them horrendous. And I couldn't remember the numbers that you have to press. And doing the Brain HQ, and it would allow me to memorise more things. And I remember getting very excited when I could remember 4 things. And not 3.
Yes.
I mean, it was something just as simple as that. But that's quite important when you're doing something like remembering a phone number, or, you know, I would have the strategy also of writing it down and things like that. So you don't realise how much all this impacts your life until you actually get stuck in one of these horrible queues.
I might just intervene to also add in here that I don't know how much you worked with an occupational therapist or if you ever crossed paths with an OT, because OTs also are quite an important part of the team, and they work on cognition as well. They work on those daily living activities and those, you know, functional activities that people are trying to return to. And so we get a bit of an overlap. And I actually just had a discussion with my colleague who is working in the rehab hospital. So in the US, speech pathologists we treat heavily cognitive linguistic deficits when we see that that's kind of the foundational issue, which is a bit different in Australia. Okay, so
that's interesting.
My friend was saying, she's like, well, you know, I did look when I moved here, because I thought, is this still our scope of practice? It is. But here it's a little bit more, the OT is focusing a lot on the cognition, and the speech stays a bit more on the language side. In your case, because you had clearly language, that it was definitely a cognitive linguistic difficulty area. So I felt quite comfortable treating that, where I've encountered other situations where an individual might have some kind of language difficulties going on, but definitely so much more in the cognitive realm of, you know, executive function, memory. Those individuals, I may be saying, actually, we need an OT in this situation.
Yeah, I worked with an OT a long time after you, but it was more on the being at work. So it was less on the day-to-day sort of stuff. My husband works with OTs as well, and so some of his colleagues in the public system had sent me worksheets and things on email you know, they said, well, it'll take you 4 months to get to see the public OT. Here's what we give people out. And I just printed them out. It was things like, say there was a picture of coins on the page, you know, circle the ones that make up $3.55 or something. So it was that sort of stuff.
So anyway, I just wanted to mention that because
important.
I thought
it is really important.
That is another component.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please like, share and subscribe. I'll be back next time for part 4 of my interview with Laurie. We have lots to talk about. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.